Councilmember Link.
Here.
Councilmember Lorimore.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Tessari.
Here.
Mayor Bootsma.
Here.
Councilmember Rush is running late.
Okay. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Clint Lorimore.
Please join me in pledging to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have any public comments? Any public comments, Mark? Or
No, sir.
okay. Move to item 4.1, Budget Workshop, Fiscal Year 2016-2017.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members and residents, staff. It is a pleasure to be here this evening to start this first workshop. There will be others, but this will be our first workshop regarding the upcoming budget cycle. The format of the workshop tonight will be obviously an introduction, the historical snapshot, a look at our current fiscal situation, a financial forecast, public safety discussion, prioritization of services, and conclude with another discussion. I'd like to point out that the public safety portion is really going to be covered in greater detail at the March 23rd budget workshop meeting. Obviously, all the council members, you know who you are, but we have put a slide into the presentation because this presentation will be published on the city's website. And we will include annotated notes to that publication so that residents that were not here this evening will be able to read through the presentation and the slides and kind of have a general understanding of the purpose of tonight's presentation. We also have a slide with our planning commissioners and public safety commissioners. Obviously, many of you have made those appointments, so I will not go over that in great detail. I've also just wanted to put this slide in here about our organizational chart. It's very difficult to read, but one of the items I really wanted not only the council but our residents to see is that we are lean staff. We're mighty, very mighty. We accomplish many things, and I'm very proud of our staff. They do an outstanding job, and this speaks to the very highly efficient team that we have at City Hall, and I couldn't be prouder to work with everyone there. As you'll see, we have, in the city clerk's office, we have 3 staff people. In the finance department, we have 2 contract positions and 3 additional staff persons, one of which is part-time. In the Public Works Department, we have a Public Works manager, a city engineer, 4 additional city engineers, a building official, building inspectors, and permit technicians. Those are all contract staff positions. In our planning department, we have a planning director, an assistant planning director, and 2 assistant planners. Excuse me, a senior planner and an assistant planner. Again, those are contract staff positions. In both of those departments, we also have a litany of additional expertise which we can avail ourselves to without adding additional staffing. So we can flex up and utilize services, a broad range of services that are provided through both of those consultant teams without adding permanent staff positions or exposure to retirement and pensions. Under our police services, again, we are a contract city for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and we have a police chief, which is Captain Jason Horton, and assistant police chief, which is Scott Forbes. As you'll see, we also have, under the city manager's office, we have an assistant city manager position, which has remained vacant for the last year. And we have a senior management analyst, a code enforcement officer, a second code enforcement officer, and a part-time public information officer. Lastly, we are also a contract city for CAL FIRE. We have our battalion chief, Justin Scribner, here. But again, that is a position where we can avail ourselves, much like the sheriff's department, to a multitude of specialties without increasing staffing. I would like to briefly, before I turn this over to our finance team, I would like to kind of give the council and the residents an understanding of why we chose to do this workshop in this format. We've never done this before in this manner. We're hitting 5 years. We've hit 5 years, so it was very important, I felt, to have a flashback, if you will, to show the progression that we've made since incorporation to present, to tell a story and to let you see the number and the data and the trends and the projections that have taken us through the years. With that, I would really like to emphasize that we have had major obstacles in the last 5 years, and we continue to have major obstacles ahead of us. As many of you know, we did not avail in SB 2025, which is the restoration of the VLF. We're continuing that battle with Senator Roth and other legislative bodies, but we have been the second hardest hit city by the loss of VLF. So the numbers that you're about to see, they're bittersweet. You know, I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of everything that city staff have achieved through your direction and through your wisdom and your guidance and your goals and objectives. We have a strong council, and your vision has truly been critical to leading the city over these last 5 years, and you have much to be proud of. This entire city has much to be proud of. And we have done it with losing $16 million in vehicle license fees. And that loss will continue. And we've also done it with no love from Sacramento. I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but it is true. The city of Eastville has not received any support from Sacramento, while the other newly incorporated cities have received significant assistance. Again, we are the second hardest hit city out of the VLF loss. Some of the other cities had received funding year over year. Eureka Valley obviously received none. But the loss of that VLF, you will see its impacts in years ahead. And so with that, the purpose was to really create a big picture here. It wasn't just to think about the budget for next year. This is to think about the budget 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, and for everyone to be thinking of what's to come and the ramifications of the decisions that we make in the short term do have a long-term impact. So I'm going to get back to the discussion here. We have an introduction. Our current population in the city of Eastville is 60,633. That comes from the California Department of Finance, which typically publishes that data in May. So we'll be waiting for the new numbers here shortly. I suspect that will be significantly higher. Our median age in Eastville is a little bit over 30 years old. We have a very young demographic in Eastville. We currently have 14,692 households and many under construction. The median household income is currently $107,445. The median home price is $480,000, which is up 1.05% from 2014. The source is HDL. The unemployment rate in Eastville is 4.1% compared to the county of 6.1%, and that is from the EDD. That's kind of to give you the background of where we are right now, demographically speaking. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, our finance guru, and she will take you through the remainder of the presentation. If there are any questions, please feel free to state them as we go through the presentation, and staff will do their best to address your questions as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to echo that. If there's any questions, feel free to ask at any time. We're happy to answer it. Like Michelle said, this is designed to give a bigger picture, and it's the first of a series of workshops. We'll have another workshop in a couple weeks designed to focus more on public safety and contract rates and staffing, how they staff their departments. And then in early May, we should come back with a budget draft. We will also have a more detailed workshop on how we get those numbers. And this is just designed to give a bigger picture and garnish some discussion and think about the long-term objectives of the city. So here's a historical snapshot of where the city started. Our first fiscal year was 2011. We began the city with an operating budget of $2.9 million, and that was from the incorporation document. And we had, after our first year, we already had $4 million in reserves, so that was a huge accomplishment our first year. Going all the way to 2015, you can see we've, just in the last 4 years, increased our operating budget to $15,000 and have reserves of just over $22 million. So it's a huge accomplishment for the city. It's a testament to the direction of the city council and the diligence of the staff as well. So you can see the city is definitely growing. Michelle mentioned, she touched on vehicle license fee, and you can see there the total loss through the current fiscal year is just over $16 million. And that had a huge impact our first year, so it kind of set the tone as far as how we go about budgeting, how conservative our estimates are, and how we strive to save for the future, because you just never know what could happen through outside forces, either recession or state legislature, a number of things. And you can see there the ongoing loss is $2.9 million a year, and that's property tax in lieu of the vehicle license fee. So we'll continue to see that loss year over year. We take a very conservative budgeting approach. We try to be mindful of, like I said, outside sources. We have a strong fiscal management from the City Council. You all have been very business-minded. We always live within our means. And we always try to save for the future. We are a new city, and we are looking into adding new facilities. We have fairly new infrastructure, so years down the line we will have to update that infrastructure. And also public safety. That's been a huge priority for the council, so we want to look into the future and the cost for public safety. And we also leverage technology. Like Michelle said, we have a very minimal staff, so we try to mitigate that with different technologies to increase efficiency. You can see year over year, we've added to our reserves from just over $4 million to $22 million. Let me go back to that other slide. That red mark is a contingency reserve. The budget process, the council adopted a resolution a few years ago that the city would save 50% of our operating expenditures, which equates to about 6 months of spending for any kind of emergency or recession or a contingency. A lot of cities don't have that large of a contingency, so that's usually larger than what we see in other cities.
Anna, if I could jump in for one moment, Council, I wanted to point out that that $22 million in reserves, that is with stomaching a $16 million loss on VLF. That is also while we have increased staffing levels across the board to meet the growing demands of our community and the growing increase in population. and weathering the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. So we have much to be proud of, and again, staff has done a phenomenal job.
Michelle, would you like to mention these?
Yes, thank you. These last few years for Eastvale have been, they've been cemented with some awards. Some of them are better known than others. Money Magazine in 2014 did include Eastvale as one of the best places to live in the United States. While we did not make their top 100, we did make the list of best places across the United States. Interestingly enough, they did feature us in that same season as the number 11 best places to live if you are rich and single. In 2015, the city of Eastvale was listed as the number 2 best cities for California families. So number 2 best place to raise a city if you have a family. And that was by Wallet Hub. And Wallet Hub ranked us as number 1 city for education, health, and safety. And that speaks to our high-performing schools, our wonderful park system, and the quality of life. We were also, by backgroundcheck.org, this year ranked number 24 as one of the number 24 safest city in California for 2016.
Thank you, Michelle. A big driver for some of the goals that we've strived to achieve is the strategic plan, which was adopted in 2013. 4 goals were identified, and this is basically it sets priorities for the future. We want to establish a solid fiscal foundation, which, as you've seen, we've done that, and we hope to continue to do that. We want to optimize the city's economic development potential to bring in more sales tax revenue, some more jobs, high-quality businesses. Number 3 is to maintain an excellent level of public safety. That's been a huge priority for the council and for the city. And number 4 is to provide high-quality public facilities and infrastructure. So the first goal is establish a solid fiscal foundation for the city. And as you can see, we've strived to do several things. We've adopted a balanced budget every year. We've adopted a fee schedule. We renegotiated the revenue neutrality agreement, which essentially reduced the city's debt to the county over 30 years. And we've also implemented several software systems to increase efficiency and to mitigate some of those staffing issues. Number 2 is to optimize the city's economic development potential. There's been several objectives achieved in this goal. One of them is the Goodman Berkshire project, which was approved and is under development. A dedicated economic development website and Shop Eastvale. We've had the Small Business Development Center for 3 years, and we've developed an economic development committee. Public safety, we're under construction for the fire station number 2. We've added a motorcycle officer, a new fire truck, a new medic unit, and a fire inspector and safety specialist. The high-quality public facilities, we've completed construction of Hellman Avenue. We've researched City Hall and a new library, negotiated right-of-way for the Archibald and Limonite north in the city limits, and completed a bikeway master plan. And those are just some of the objectives achieved. And you can see year by year, the city has been extremely busy. These are some of the highlights of each year. I don't want to read them all, but I'll mention a few. Let's see, we launched the city website. That was one of the first goals of the city. We've started the business registration program. We took it over from the county. We dedicated Eastvale's first fire station. In 2013, we also saw a lot of activities. We adopted the zoning code, design guidelines, the master plan. And 2014, again, a lot of activity. Acquired land for the second fire station, adopted the residential rental registration ordinance, foreclosure registration ordinance. We increased patrol coverage by 10 hours a day, and again, renegotiated the revenue neutrality agreement. Last year, we also saw a lot of activity. The Chandler Area Vision Plan. We purchased a new fire truck, broke ground for the second fire station. So you see the city's been very busy. Staff has been working hard to meet a lot of those goals and objectives within the growing city. As far as CIP construction, a list of completed projects you can see there, and a lot of are still under construction. And then future projects, near future projects, are a new traffic signal at Sumner and 65th Street. The Limonite interchange at the I-15 should be starting next year. The estimated completion date is December 2018. Storm drain facilities, residential slurry seal this summer, and researching City Hall and Library. So we have a lot of good things happening in the city. So that's just an overview of where we've been, and we want to look at now kind of where we are right now, moving into the next budget year. As you can see, the city's lived within its means. Our revenues have exceeded our expenditures year over year, and every time we have a surplus, it adds to our savings and our reserves. That's how we continue to grow our reserves to the $22 million. Just want to give you an overview of where the money comes from, what revenues we receive in the city. By far, our biggest revenue source is taxes, and that consists of property tax, transfer tax, sales tax, and franchise tax. Other sources are permits and licenses. We have a lot of development within the city. Charges for services and other, that includes citation revenue, it includes investment income and other miscellaneous items. This is sort of another picture of where our revenue comes from. As you can see, 81% of our revenues come from taxes. And this is a great thing. We've been fortunate to get a lot of our sales tax has grown, our property tax has grown, but it's also a little bit of an area of concern because it can change based on economic fluctuations. So if we have a recession, people aren't buying as much, we're not getting as much sales tax. They're not selling their houses, we're not getting transfer tax. Maybe the value of the homes go down, we're not getting as much property tax. So we always take that into consideration. And also with permits and licenses, once the city's built out, we're not going to have as large of a revenue source from permits. Just want you to think about what we think about that when we go through our budget projections. So sales tax, we have a Riverside County sales tax rate of 8%. Of that 8 cents, only 1 cent comes to the city for every dollar purchased. We also have a half-cent sales tax that goes to Measure A, but that is restricted for transportation. So we cannot use that in our general fund. And the rest goes to Riverside County and the state of California. The same with property tax. The county assesses 1% of the value of a home to a general assessment. So for every dollar paid in property tax, the city only gets not even 10 cents on that dollar. Most of it goes to schools, the county, and a revenue augmentation fund, which is also to fund education. It's interesting to note that we started with about less than 2.5% to go to the city, but we renegotiated that with a revenue neutrality agreement to get it up to just over 3 1/3. So it's kind of telling that the city doesn't see a lot of that revenue from that source. And I want to note that that does not include the Melrose and the CFD taxes. That's just the 1% general tax. So this is more of a practical example. For a new car purchased for $40,000, the city is only going to see roughly $400 of that sale. $200 we will also receive, but again, that goes to transportation. And also with a home purchase, for a $400,000 home purchase, the city will only see about $133 of that. So it kind of gives you an overview of, yes, we pay a lot in taxes, but the city does not receive very much of that. Also, I want to mention that the city will only receive revenue if it is purchased, if there's a point of sale within the city limits. The council has adopted several programs, several resolutions, one of them being foreclosure registration, another being business registration and rental registration. As you can see, each of these revenue sources has grown tremendously just in the last year. There's several reasons for this. First is public awareness and enforcement. Each new program there needs to be some education happening with the citizens. For vehicle code and parking, we recently purchased a couple of handheld devices. This took the place of manual citations. So there was a lot of staff time taken to write the citations, to process them, to get them in the system, to transfer them back and forth between agencies. With the e-sites, it's just all electronic now, and it saves a lot of staff time. The third reason is that we've outsourced to third party for collections. So a lot of these that we hadn't seen the revenue in a couple of years, we are now collecting on those. So that's the reason for the huge increases. It should taper off within the next few years as the programs mature and as some of the collections take place. So it just shows you some of the efforts of the city council and the staff to approve and develop these programs. So now we've talked about the revenues, we can talk about where the money goes. A majority of the expenditures go to public safety, the rest is community development and administration. This kind of gives you another picture of this. The green is part of the administration. Those brown pie pieces are part of community development. Blue is law enforcement, and the red is fire services. Just want to give you an overview of police. Like Michelle mentioned, we will have more details in the next council meeting as far as how contract rates are derived and how the different departments are staffed. Currently, we have an operating budget of almost $7 million in the police department. We have staffing of 26 positions, 80 service hours a day, and in those 80 service hours a day, we have 23 sworn officers and 2 CSOs. And we recently added a motorcycle officer. It's been the trend over the last few years that the increase year over year for police costs have been roughly 7% each year. In comparison, the fire department has an operating budget of $3.2 million. The funding for this comes from a specific tax. If we go back to that property tax slide, it's 6.3%, and that is restricted to fire services. So we don't use that property tax source for other services. We don't use it for police or administration or anything. It goes directly to fund fire services and construction. We have 5 positions per shift with a total staff of 15 per station. We added a paramedic squad, and calls for services have been up roughly 39% from 2011 when the city started. Again, the operating increases has grown partially from contract rates and partially from adding the paramedic squad. That's kind of where we've been. Now I want to talk about where the city is going and the trends that we've seen and forecasting them into the future. In order to do that, we use it to kind of gauge economic conditions. It's a tool to think about the future, not only now, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. We want to think long term. And how do we want to invest the city's resources? Do we want to fund future operations, add new programs, invest in infrastructure, add new facilities? And there's a myriad of things that the city considers when looking into the future. That $22 million of reserve is called fund balance. That is basically a savings account that the city has as a reserve, and we classify that 4 different ways. There's restricted fund balance, which is stipulated by outside sources, and an example of that would be the fire tax. We can only use that for a specific purpose. Other categories are committed. We committed 50% of our operating budget to be reserved for an emergency contingency. We also committed $1 million to a city hall construction, and there could be a number of ways to commit that, and you can change those ways depending on the needs of the city, but it has to be adopted by resolution. The other is assigned. Basically, that's just a category that's not restricted or committed, and then unassigned is just a general savings account, basically.
Anna, can you going back to that slide, the fire property tax, for the benefit of the council, can you explain, is our $22 million reserve, that includes the fire structural fund, correct? Okay.
You can see that here. It's broken down right now. We have $6.9 million restricted for fire operations, and that includes future operations. It includes construction of the fire station. It includes everything to do with fire that we have in basically a savings account for fire right now. We've committed $1 million to the construction of City Hall, and that was adopted in 2014 when the City Hall had a budget of about $6 million. Right now, it's grown to 2 buildings, including a library, additional land, so the budget of that will increase. So possibility of committing more funds to that would definitely be an option. And then also the 50% contingency, we have about $6.2 million committed for a rainy day. So as you can see, of that $22 million, there's only about $8 million left as unassigned. It's kind of hard to read, but this is taken directly from our financial statements. Under general fund, you'll see again 6.9 for fire, 6.2 for the emergency fund, and $1 million for the City Hall. And again, committed reserves can change. You can adopt different savings, whatever the needs of the city are. It just needs to be adopted by resolution. The restricted, the fire fund, that again is from outside sources and is not. It doesn't change unless the outside legislation changed. So as we see, there's about 22 million of that. 8 million is left. And I just want to kind of give you food for thought as far as long-term projects. These aren't. These can be a few years in the future. The I-15 interchange is, I believe, starting next year. Total cost is $45 million. The impact to the city is unknown. We don't know what the matching portion of that is yet, but it should be paid through Measure A. Hamner Bridge, the estimated cost is $56 million. Of that, 88% is grant funding, and the rest is matching. The lead city is the city of Norco. They've asked the city preliminarily for $3.6 million as a matching for that project. The City Hall and library, it's grown to about an estimate of $19 million, depending on the land purchase and the design elements. We're looking into grant funding for that or a land exchange to reduce some of the costs for that. But that should be a fairly large hit. The Emergency Operations Center, that's estimated about $875,000. We're looking into grant funding for that as well. Limonite connection to Kimball, that's a long-term project, and the total cost is unknown. There's about $10 million in TUMP money for the city, so there shouldn't be a large impact to the general fund. In addition to infrastructure, we have also the cost to add services, public safety services. For 10 patrol hours a day, it's about $577,000. To add a motor officer, it's about $318,000. A medic squad is $710,000, and a medic engine is $1.1 million. With the construction of the second fire station, we will be adding a second medic engine, so that will increase the cost to the fire operations budget by that amount. So when we're looking at the future, as far as budgeting, we have certain methodologies we use. We start with the status quo. What are we doing now? And we just project that into the future. We don't add personnel unless requested, and we use certain percentages based on the historical trends that we've seen. For police and fire, it's generally been about 7 to 8%. This year, we're projecting out about 6%. We've been notified by the county that it should go down a little bit this year. And non-safety, we're generally conservative at 3% growth a year based on CPI or other factors. And we try to be realistic in our revenue growth. Even though we've seen a huge amount of growth in our revenue, we don't know that we can anticipate it year after year, just depending on economic conditions or outside forces. So we're pretty conservative with that as well. So with that, you can see it's divided in two. We see the actual where revenues have exceeded expenditures. In 2016 and 17, our expenditures should exceed our revenues, and this is mostly due to the construction of the fire station, which was anticipated. So we are investing in our future by taking those reserves and constructing the fire station. And as you can see, it kind of the expenditures are starting to exceed the revenues. And you can see from this slide in 2019, we're barely breaking even, and moving forward, we should see a net loss. So this kind of gets us thinking about the future, how we want to save for the future, or how we want to invest the city, unless other items change, like the public safety contract rate. If we see a huge increase in property tax, anything could happen, but we definitely want to be conservative in our approach and kind of look at historical trends. These are items to take into consideration that are outside our control, including public safety costs, water restrictions, aging infrastructure, population growth, major development projects, and a construction of the City Hall and Library. So just things to think about for the future.
If I could jump in here. With the water restrictions, one of the items to kind of bring to the council's attention, which is an outside force that we don't have much say in, is with the water restrictions is an adjustment in water rates and capacity charges from our partner agency, Jurupa Community Services District. This is something that the council has expressed concern. Staff has been engaging JCSD for several months now to express our concern, but the net effect of a capacity charge or availability charge is to incoming development. And that's where we have an economic development impact. If a proposed business were to come into Eastvale at this time, after JCSD's water capacity charge increase, they could be looking at approximately a 67% increase in their fees, which are charged not by the city of Eastvale, but are charged by a different agency, thereby affecting our ability to bring in the best businesses to the city of Eastvale, or it's going to result in the city of Eastvale entering into economic development incentive packages to buy down or give them some kind of a sales tax sharing agreement to offset those costs. Another factor that is also coming down the pipe is increase in development impact fees from Western Riverside Council of Governments and their TUMP fees. So the TUMF is looking at a potential increase of somewhere around 60% increase by the end of summer. And our school district, they have fees as well that they charge the development community when they come to Eastvale. And they have shared that they're looking at fee increases between, I think they said 3 and 15% from the state. Those come down from the state. So that's a very real and potentially devastating impact to a developer that is considering coming to our city, because they may be able to go across the street in a neighboring county and not have the same fee structure, but they could capitalize on our market by being close to Eastvale and creating impacts while gaining all the sales tax revenue. So that is something that is very real and is coming, and is not something that is a fee imposed by the city of Eastvale, but will potentially have a negative economic impact at the local level.
So with all of those impacts in mind, we strive to balance our budget every year, and in order to do that, looking into the future, we need to think about how to increase revenues, decrease expenditures, or maybe a combination of both. Some examples of increasing revenues is a fee study. We did one in adopted September 2013. We want to make sure we're recovering all of our costs. We want to optimize economic development potential to mitigate some of those impacts that Michelle just mentioned in order to generate that sales tax. Look for grant funding opportunities. We're actively doing that. We should have a contract or a grant writer for your consideration tonight. Also, utility user tax, that's sort of a last resort. It must be voter approved, and it's usually to pay off general fund bonds and debt, so definitely a last resort. Examples of decreasing expenditures. In order to do that, we can reduce non-essential services. With the minimal staffing we have, it's hard to identify what that would be. Reduce staffing levels at City Hall, cut sworn officer positions, and reduce fire staffing, and explore alternatives to public safety contracts that are escalating.
I'd also like to add here that this is where maximizing operational efficiencies is very critical. That's why over the last few months, the last year, we have rolled out many of these operational efficiencies at City Hall through software that have allowed us to free up staff time or the turnaround time on things. So many of those operational efficiencies are resulting in cost-saving measures, such as the e-cites, that the handheld citation devices that that council approved several months ago. The e-citizen app is another form of a operational efficiency. Our Springbrook software in the finance department, and Acela, the software purchase for land management system, and also Laserfiche, which is another software implementation that we've done at City Hall to reduce staff demands on records requests and records management.
I'm going to paint a picture. Because public safety is such a huge portion of the operating budget, we just want to show you the trends as far as the growth of the rates. In the last 5 years, it's been a growth of 54% combined. And with the trends, we expect another 40% growth. And this is with 6% projections moving forward. It could be less depending on labor negotiations this summer, but we have yet to see that. Again, because it's such a large portion of the budget, I just want to touch on the public safety. We will go into more detail with contract rates and how that's derived in the next council meeting. But this just gives you just a very big overview of where we are with public safety. So the green bars are the police expenditures, and you can see the trend, it keeps going up. The yellow line is the sworn personnel, and that stayed stagnant. We've increased our sworn personnel by 3 since incorporation. And the green line is the population growth. So as you can see, the growth in expenditures has somewhat mirrored the population, but there's a gap between the yellow line and the green line. The increase is due to contract rates. It's not due to an increase in personnel. So that's a huge concern for the city. And if it keeps growing, as we mentioned in a previous slide, that will experience a net loss in overall operations. A brief overview of the service hours per day and the staffing of the police department. We've gone from 70 to 80. We've increased our patrol deputies by 2. We've added a traffic deputy, and total sworn personnel has increased by 3. For a total of 26.
Council, this is the point where I really want to emphasize that this is a direct result of the loss of VLF. And that loss will continue $2.9 million year over year. So this is where we are seeing, while Sacramento says, oh, Eastvale, you don't need any money. Yes, we do. And this is where we have to close every gap, plug every hole, and use every opportunity to stretch every dollar, every cent to make up the difference and to be self-sufficient. I don't know that Sacramento will ever help us. And so we have some tough decisions to make in the future. But public safety is your number one priority, and you have shown it through your additional staffing. You've shown it through your commitment to building another fire station, your commitment to adding a motor officer, another fire truck, a medic truck. But without the VLF dollars, it's going to have to be in baby steps.
So, quick question. For this one here, we have this slide. An increase in 10 hours from 2011 to 2015. That's with 3 officers. Is that what that equals? 3 officers equates to?
It's like 2.
Ooh. I'll let Captain Horton answer that question, but I would like to stress to the council that the real nitty-gritty details of public safety staffing levels, we will go into that in greater detail on the March 23rd workshop.
So, Councilmember Larimore, the 10 hours a day is that the city contracts for a guaranteed 10-hour patrol shift for every 24 hours, 7 days a week. So, extrapolated out over the course of a week, it's a percentage. But for raw bodies, it would be almost 3, somewhere between 2 and 3 deputies to drive that, because obviously they don't work 7 days a week. But I'll be more than happy to get more detailed at our next workshop.
I appreciate it. It was just that a previous slide had indicated 10 more hours, and I was trying to figure out what that meant in terms of bodies. So, thank you. I've been holding on to questions. Should we just hold on to them until the end? What are we doing, guys?
We're happy to answer any as you have them.
Okay.
Yeah, let's kind of hold off until the end.
Okay, we'll hold off till the end.
Okay. Again, with the police department, you see the population has grown 27%. The hours per day grew 14% since 2011. Mirroring that, the sworn personnel has also grown 13%, but the calls for service has grown 35%. So it greatly outweighs the number of personnel that we've increased the last 4 years. To increase the contract hours, 10 hours a day, it would cost the city roughly $577 a year to do that. And again, Captain Horton can go into more detail on the 23rd unless you have other questions today, but it involves a other services from the police department, just not bodies. It includes other services as well, helicopter, other task force, and so forth. So it's an overall rate increase, not just bodies. Adding motor officer would be $318,000 a year, and the first year of that would be higher than the subsequent years due to one-time startup costs for training and uniforms and so forth. So the first year would be about $318,000, and subsequent years would be a little bit less.
Can I ask one question on that? After adding the motor officer after the first year, what would the cost be?
About $280,000.
Currently it's about $268,000 a year. Just in case anybody was wondering, a motor officer doesn't make $268,000 a year. The reason why the rate is, and again, I'll get very detailed on this, but as you can imagine, there is a long list of support staff behind each deputy that it takes for the deputy to be proficient in the field. Logistics personnel, clerical staff, accounting staff, investigators, specialized service personnel, folks that man our evidence warehouse, so that these positions, because they are percentages for each deputy, is the reason why the rate is what it is. But again, I will explain that in further detail.
Thank you.
So that's a general overview of the last 4 years of public safety and what it would take to add more personnel and contract hours per day. Considerations for increased staffing, benefits of doing that would be reduced crime, enhanced customer service, faster response times, more follow-up, enhanced safety, and increased community outreach. So there's several benefits to doing so, but again, we strive to outweigh the cost, what the city can afford, versus the benefits as well. On to fire department, we kind of see the same picture. The rates have increased while the personnel has remained stagnant. So there, again, there's that gap of the increased contract rates versus no increase in the personnel. We've increased quite a bit as far as total staff, but the fire staff per shift has just increased by 3. That's with adding a medic unit, a 2-person medic unit, and the fire safety specialist and inspector. So per shift, that's actual bodies per shift, and then fire staff is over the course of a week. Is that right?
Total staffing for the station.
Yeah, for the station.
Just like at Morgan State, they only work 7 days a week, so we have to have that many bodies to staff that fire station 7 days a week.
We've seen the calls for service increase by 39 over the last 4 years. Police, it was 35, so you can see it's pretty similar. The increased staff per shift has doubled, but actual bodies, I mean, it's pretty minimal. It's only 6 5 per day, and then the fire inspector and safety specialist. Benefits to increasing staffing is reduced response times, enhanced safety, and outreach.
Council members, with the addition of the fire safety specialist, I'd like to point out that we have taken kind of an innovative approach to that, and we share a person with the city of Norco. So we've entered into a contract with CAL FIRE and Norco to split a body, if you will, between the two cities to try to maximize our dollars and increase the turnaround time to our development community.
In addition, to add a medic squad, a 2-person squad, it would be $710 a year. And the cost to add a medic engine would be $1.1 million, which we anticipate with the new fire station opening. So that pretty much concludes where we've been, where we are now, what we anticipate for the future. It gives us a lot to consider. With all of that, because Eastville is such a great community, we want a balance of services. We want to have a high priority on public safety. We also need to consider public works, but building and safety. All of these departments together make for a great city to work, to live, and we're proud to be part of Eastville. So just food for thought. This is just to garnish discussion, to get you thinking about some of the priorities of the city. We just want to ask, are current service levels satisfactory? Is the public satisfied with what the city gives to them? Are we meeting city and community demands? Can we sustain the services that we're providing now with the increased costs? And are we meeting strategic plan objectives? And how should we invest in the future? Do we want to look into new programs? Do we want to save for a rainy day? Do we want to invest in the Civic Center? There's a lot to consider, especially keeping in mind those long-term projects and where we want to see the city long-term. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, my first question would be on the new fire station. How is that going to be staffed? I mean, are we going to bring the medical unit to the new fire station and a fire truck at Station 27? Or, because we didn't build a fire station to leave empty, either we add to that, and we got a medical unit, so I want to kind of, how we're going to staff that.
Honorable Mayor, you're absolutely correct. You would not build a fire station to leave it vacant. We did order a new fire truck, which should be coming within the next few months. And that new fire truck and the appropriate staffing from the medic unit that is currently at Fire Station 27 will be shifted over to Fire Station 31. The consideration at this time, and I'll certainly let Chief Scribner elaborate on this, what we're proposing at this time is to run an engine out of 27 with the appropriate staffing and an engine out of 31 with appropriate staffing. If council wishes to consider additional staffing for the medic unit, then that is certainly something that would require a staffing up to continue to provide that service. I will say that the engines will have paramedics on them. But again, that is certainly something that the council needs to keep in, that you need to take into consideration. Do you want to staff the medic unit? We have the resource, which is the equipment, the physical truck, but at this time, it had not been planned previously by previous administration to staff the medic unit. It had simply been planned to move the staffing from the medic unit over to the new fire station.
Okay, then I have a question. What happens to our paramedic unit? We just park it? It's brand new, so we're going to just park it?
Mr. Mayor, yes, if it's not covered, then definitely would be parked at one of the fire stations, but it would be used for a multitude of different things. Public community outreach, events, picnic in the park would be one of them, where that unit would be staffed to be at the event with paramedics on board of that as well. If a fire engine does go out of service and we don't have any reserve fire engines that are in close proximity, the paramedic unit would be immediately available. But as it sits now, the recommendation from the fire department would be to staff both of the stations with one fire engine each, which would equate to 6 people on duty every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with paramedics on board the fire engine.
It just seems like it was a waste of money then, to me.
Like Michelle said, that was something that was in the works with prior administration before my time, and I believe before Michelle's time as well. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and that's something that's going to be up for consideration to the council on the 23rd. We can go into further detail with the cost of staffing a new agent and a medic squad as well.
Okay. Clint?
Thank you. On that, going back to the financial forecast, it was page 20, general funds committed reserve slide. There was 6.9 million restricted for fire operations in the reserve category. So this would be able, what are we talking about in terms of staffing?
The new fire station is, estimated about $8 million in construction total. We have not completed construction, so a lot of that will go towards the construction of the fire station.
Okay. You know, the next page as well, I'm sorry, 2 slides later, the financial forecast looking at Civic Center, the City Hall Library, 16 to 19 million, and here we have $1 million dedicated towards reserves. So those numbers obviously don't match.
The original estimate for the City Hall was about $6 million from non-grant sources. So that would be covered through the DIF fund, development impact fee, and the shortfall was $1 million at the time we started this process in 2014. Since then, the budget has grown significantly based on the city's need, adding a library, acquiring more land, and so there's definitely a shortfall of available resources versus cost.
Right.
So that's something for consideration if you want to increase that commitment.
Okay, well, what I guess I'm concerned, I think it's wonderful, 22 million reserve, but I've been hearing it through the whole presentation, but it's not 22 million that's a reserve.
No.
We have serious commitments that we have not met yet as a city. So,
Correct. That was kind of the whole purpose of this type of a presentation to the council, was to really not just be looking at next year, but to be looking long-term down the road. These are not projects that are going to happen overnight, but they are obligations. They're commitments. And so while the project for City Hall has changed in scope potentially because of the increasing demand from the community for a library, we have added that. One thing that is not considered in here is, this is all based on the cost of land acquisition. This is based on, if we're able to secure grant funding, that is certainly something that would offset that obligation or that commitment. Packaging the current parcel, which we do own as part of a 1031 exchange, into the purchase of a new parcel is again something that would reduce our capital outlay. But again, these are very real long-term projects, and you're absolutely right, Councilmember Lorimer. 22 million is not, while it's called the reserve, it is encumbered by various long-term projects.
right, when I see reserves like that, we have, all of us up here are absolutely pro-public safety in terms of both police, fire. We want to see our residents served. And a number like that, but we're not able to provide the number of officers that is recommended. Right now, we're, I believe, at 0.4. The officers per 1,000 is supposed to be 1 officer per 1,000 is a suggestion out there. So that number, I want the public to know that it's not that we are sitting on this money. We absolutely need to put this money towards things that the city needs. So we're moving in that direction. So I wanted to make that clear after listening to your presentation. Let's see here, some other questions. I'll let you guys ask some while I find what I was writing down.
Bill?
Well, the only thing I want to say was as far as City Hall was, when we originally had the concept of it, it was going to go on the old Owl's Corner lot. The land was paid for, the infrastructure was in, so the budget was set fairly low because we didn't have to withstand all the funds and it would cost to put that in play. Since then, the building has expanded in size, we've added a library, and now we're looking for more property. So that's a big hit of that 19 million, believe me. That's a huge hit. We would probably be really back down at about the 6 million if we had stayed with the original concept. But again, the library is extremely important, and we just have to start weighing these things and see which way we're going to go with it. You can't have everything. As much as I want a Rolls Royce, I'm going to have to settle for a Bentley. Sorry.
You're absolutely right, Councilmember Link. And that's the reality of the situation. And the council has always acted in a very prudent and conservative manner, which is also echoed by staff. We traditionally take a very conservative approach to estimating revenues, and we overestimate expenses. So the Civic Center and library combo, worst case scenario, I think 19 million is a little on the, potentially on the high side. But we would hate to give you an estimate on an expense that was significantly under the par.
That's all I had.
Joe?
Yeah, you actually touched on it. It was regarding the city hall and library with the 16 to 19 million. My question was going to be, how much of that do you think we could actually make up in other sources of funding?
That's a great question, Mayor Pro Tem Tessari. We met with County EDA, and because the county EDA is in charge of the library system, and they have an aggressive approach towards grant writing. But at our council meeting later on this evening, we are proposing a contract with a grant writing firm for the express purpose of scouring the United States and looking for every single penny that we can find to offset some of these obligations. And so I have been looking through grants, and while I'm not a grant writing expert, there are grants out there from private foundations that love libraries, from private foundations that love to see technology put in libraries, from other organizations that want to support the community. For example, Walmart has an annual grant that they provide for community development. There are a lot of potential offsets, and so this is where I think it's critical to look creatively and outside of the box for ways to stretch a dollar and maximize our investment and our resources. And so later this evening, that's part of the reason that we're bringing a grant writing firm to the council for consideration, because I think there are some opportunities here. We have a great staff that takes advantage of all of the public works opportunities, but outside of public works, I think we are missing the mark on the possibility of grant funding for some of our various needs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do have a great staff, and you said you were proud. You should be. Other question I had, the EOC, we'll still have funds available from the fire fund to pay for that, right?
Actually, that is a piece of the puzzle that would not be covered by the structural fire fund as far as having enough funds to cover it. That's a kind of a consideration for the council. Initially, it was to be part of Fire Station 31. Then the suggestion was, well, let's have it at City Hall because, all the city staff, if there's an emergency, are going to have to shift over to a different building on the other side of town. So that is a component that is in flux as far as where and how it would be funded. But it is still on the table.
Okay. Another question I had was our roads, obviously we use the Measure A fund. Is there, on the horizon, do you see a situation where the money we're able to draw out of there is going to not be adequate to actually service our
Yes, gas
infrastructure?
tax is going down because the cost of fuel decreases. And vehicles are increasing in their miles per gallon, their efficiency. More people across the United States, California obviously in particular, are going to electric vehicles. So as you increase the efficiency on gasoline and shift to alternative forms of transportation, our gas tax dollars go down. Also, as you see OPEC increasing production, they drive down the cost of crude oil per barrel, which translates into a decrease at the pump, which is great for everyone driving an automobile, but it's not great for us as far as gas tax goes.
Yeah, it is a really big concern. I know they're working on legislation right now in Sacramento to do an alternate tax for mileage, and I don't know how that works as far as the percentage that comes back to the municipalities from Sacramento. Is it the same percentage as the gas tax, or are they going to change it so they can keep more money?
You know, that's a
So-
great question, and that is something that they're studying. I think in the next few days, we will see an announcement on the city's website encouraging drivers here in the Inland Empire to participate in the pilot program for logging your miles and reporting them, because they're trying to figure it out. The system is broken, and Sacramento is trying to find a way to fix it, but I think it's going to have to take a multi-pronged approach, and there are some studies going on. Like I said, the pilot program is one of them.
The last thing I had, Councilman Larimore obviously touched on it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you know, it's just it's shocking. You know, from incorporation until now, we've only added 3 deputy personnel, and we've gained almost 20,000 people. So I know you said baby steps, but we need to find a really big baby so that we can get some more deputies on the street.
Again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but again, there are some grant funding opportunities that I have seen that speak specifically to fire staffing, that speak specifically to police services, and those are things that should the council approve such a contract, we will aggressively pursue every penny to fill those gaps. And I'm,
Sorry, yeah,
Councilmember Rush?
not to show up late to the party and then jump right in. I just, I guess my timing is serendipitous on the gas tax. The commission approved a resolution today, or adopted a resolution to send to the California Transportation Commission asking that the gas tax be stabilized, because right now it fluctuates and it just went down a couple months ago, and it's not a long-term solution. But if it's actually stabilized and fixed, and then indexed per CIP and cost of living, the governor's plan is kind of middle of the road, 17.3 cents per gallon, and there's higher and lower ones, but they took that as a decent average. That'll add about $6 billion to Riverside County over the next, however long it lasts, 20 years. So, right, that's part of the problem right now, is it fluctuates and it's depending on a number of factors. But on the vehicle miles traveled, there is a pilot program, as Ms. Nissen said. You can sign up if you want a black box in your car. I personally don't, but you can sign up. They are actually trying to encourage Riverside County residents to sign up, because the concern is, is with everything in the transportation model, and Clinton knows this as well. Riverside and San Bernardino counties and Imperial County, to a certain extent, a lot of times get shortchanged because of the LA County centric model, and everybody likes LA. They're cool and slick, and we get the short end of the stick. So I guess, if it is going to happen, if it is inevitable, they do need data from Riverside County so that they could try to make the program as equitable as possible. But if you just Google, I think it's, I forget, I just blanked on it right now, but it's
Save Our Roads.
yeah, Save Our Roads, or vehicle miles traveled pilot program. It'll get you all the information. So, but ultimately, in our county, there's about over the next 15 to 20 years is a $70 billion shortfall, and Measure A is ending in 2030, and so the campaign is kind of already starting to re-up that for another 30 years. So,
Now, how do they decide to split up the money in Riverside County? I mean, have they talked about that? How?
for the vehicle miles traveled,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, okay.
No, it's really what the Transportation Commission is doing right now is encouraging folks to participate in the program so that there's enough data available to, if and when it happens, we have the data so that we can fight for ourselves. If there's no data, and if it happens,
then there's nothing we can really, fight for or get our appropriate allocation. So you kind of got to get over the moral or political hump of whether we agree with it or not. And I think there's only about 2,000 folks in Riverside County that have signed up for it. Just in the unincorporated area alone, there's 3 million residents. So, yeah, they do need people to participate in the program. I'm not sure exactly how it works. I think they do actually send you kind of a fast track transponder, and then the data is collected automatically. So.
That was my last question, so.
Well, I can actually add to that. They're giving participants different options associated with this program. So if you want to have, this pilot program is introducing different aspects. So if you just want to have a sticker in your window, you can do that without the black box. You can do it with the transponder, or you can have something that ties directly into your newer vehicles that tells how fast you're driving, all of that good stuff, sending it back, similar to what they do with insurance to lower your rates. So there are a lot of different options out there, including options available for those concerned about privacy. So
We did discuss today that this is, anticipated to replace gas tax. Now, does the existing tax go away? Probably not. All data indicates it's not a viable option long term unless you want to increase it. But it's kind of like the no smoking campaign. The state levies significant taxes on the pack of cigarettes for childhood programs, things of that nature, but then argues against itself and initiates all these anti-smoking campaigns, and then there's no money. So on the flip side, they're releasing the cap on the white stickers that you can put on your car to drive in the carpool lane. And we had an ad hoc committee meeting today where for the 91 and the 15 toll lanes that are being planned, we're required by law to either make carpooling free or discounted and make, and then the state is basically allowing you to drive in the carpool lane, the fast track lane at a discounted price. So we're mandated by law to discount the folks who have the white sticker as well. So that reduces the revenues. That also adds to the congestion and increases the prices, because the higher the prices on the toll lane, the less people drive, the faster you go. So speaking out, not that the state is, never two-faced, but they're initiating this vehicle miles traveled program, but they've also, in my personal opinion, created the problem by, subsidizing electric vehicles and making them more efficient.
Turn it over to Adam.
Any other questions?
yes, sir.
Okay, Clint?
On page 14, I don't know what slide it is, there's no number. It talks about the current fiscal situation, general fund, it's a pie chart. Earlier, there was discussion about 16% for permits and licenses, and how, as the city builds out, that those numbers won't be there. In your experience, having worked with other cities or examined other cities, what does that turn into once a city is built out?
Once the city is built out, you're going to have your patio permits and your pool permits, mostly fixed permits, but you won't have any major development permits. On the flip side, your costs to service those permits are going to go down significantly as well. Mm-hmm. So it should net out, but I don't have the numbers for that. I can get that for you if you'd like.
Okay, on the same pie chart, it talks about property taxes. That's this year. During the recession period, with differences associated with how much, because we have a total dollar amount, but 35% of 21 million. What were we looking at before?
Right, we started, if you just give me a minute, I can get that for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. trying to judge what sort of fluctuation we're.
Right, we
Possible.
had about 1.3 in our incorporation year and about 1.6 in the second year. And we now, we're estimating about 2.6, so it's kind of about $1 million. In a recession year, it's hard to say, but I would say maybe it'll go back, I don't know, 10 percentage points,
Okay.
just depending
we
on how
can-
bad the recession would be.
We can certainly bring back some data from HDL that does our property tax analysis to show you the year-over-year numbers.
Well, it would be helpful in determining how cautious we are moving forward. I know the market is cyclical, so we will likely, unfortunately, see something again, but hopefully not as bad. But going back to the financial forecast, balancing budget futures, there were different options that were presented. I think I could speak for all of us. Some of the top ones, the bullet points here, talking about optimizing economic development potential for increased sales tax, explore grant funding opportunities. Some of these others, though, I mean, if we have to give direction as to the way we want to go, for me, that would be my vote, those two items, absolutely. The others, not so much, particularly when some of these options here are decreasing sworn officers and fire staffing. That's not the direction I want to go. I want to see us go. I want to see the exact opposite. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I don't know if this has been discussed or not, but have we started the discussion? Maybe this is a question for HDL or some of the other plans that we have in the mix on an economic development standpoint, but to start any revenue sharing or tax sharing programs or whatever you want to call them to fund certain aspects. I know we had talked about that a couple years ago with potential projects. May not be a lot, but it may be a little bit of a seed money to start a more robust economic development program. So there's some projects that are in the works right now that we could probably do that. And there's a number of different things out there that I'm not totally familiar of, but that might provide some additional revenue opportunities specific with those projects. So
Are you referring, Councilmember Rush, to projects that we can put a fee towards or to allocate a percentage of?
not a fee per se, but if there were to be like a long-term sales tax agreement, and I don't know, stop me if I'm getting too far into the weeds here, but we discount or give them a credit of 0.25% of their sales tax that goes into a special fund, that builds up to fund economic development. We have $1 million a year. They get, I've heard of programs where it's a nonprofit, it goes to the foundation or something else. They get to write that off. It's a win-win for everybody. So.
No, that's a very good point, sir. That's a perfect thing, for example, a TOT tax. So when a hotel comes in, such as in the Goodman Commerce Center, there is a hotel that's planned for that location. Yes, you can allocate a percentage of your TOT tax or an additional room tax, or there's different ways to structure it in that model. For example, the large freeway sign that's coming in on the freeway, or on the 15 freeway and the 60, I believe the city has a passive income stream that is going to come in for that project. Again, the council could choose to earmark funds for an economic development program. There is economic development dollars in this current budget cycle, and one of the April council meetings, or possibly the March 23rd council meeting, we will be bringing to council a proposal for an economic development consultant.
Thank you.
To maximize some of the incoming projects.
Sounds good.
Any other questions, comment? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the special budget session.
Thank you.